Hi there, last week I asked what Valentine's Day project you'd like to see. And as of filming, these are the results. So we have a winner of the wire heart pendant with a solid 41%. And for the 13% of you that said wake me up when it's over, sorry, but I do have some gorgeous earrings next week for you to look forward to. Right now we're going to make this wire wrapped heart. So let's get wrapping. For this project, we're going to be using 1mm diameter copper wire, which is 18 gauge, 0.4mm diameter copper wire, which is 26 gauge, some small beads, and I suggest 2mm, there could be rondelles or rounds, and a jump ring and chain to hang it from. And the tools we need are round nose pliers, chain or flat nose pliers, wire cutting pliers, bail making pliers are optional but useful, and a hammer and block. For the heart frame, we need around 25cm or 10 inches of the 1mm or 18 gauge wire. And we want to find the centre of that wire and using the flat nose pliers, bend it in half so that the two wires are touching. I then want to part those two wires vertically. So from the top it'll look like a point. And then we can start curving these wires for the side of the heart. We're going to tackle that middle heart first. We can use the bail making pliers for the first top curve. I'm using the 8mm step on my pliers. And I want it to be slightly thinner than that, so I can adjust it with my fine flat nose pliers. And then where we want the centre to be, we're going to fold that wire back as we did before. And then part those wires slightly. And make the second top curve of the heart. We want this to be a little taller than the first to create an asymmetric heart shape. And then we can carefully finesse that shape. Once we're happy with the inner shape, we can take that outer wire around to follow the shape. And we want it to curve outwards to be further away from that inner shape around the curve and coming together at the ends. Where it meets the wires on the inner shape at the centre of the heart there, we'll fold that wire back as well. Check that we're happy with the shape. And then we can continue bending that wire to create the other half of the outer heart. And I want the two wires to come together just where they pass under where we started. We're going to finish these wires off with two little loops. The lower one will be quite close to where the wires cross. So we can just put our round nose pliers in, create that loop. And then adjust it to where we want it. Then we can trim off the excess. And then we're going to put the loop in the second wire a little bit further down. So we'll use the round nose pliers again to create that loop. And trim off the end. To help keep its shape, we're going to hammer this, but we need to avoid where the wires are laying over each other and where they cross. So I'm just going to open the heart up a little bit so I can hammer the ends. And then we can gently hammer around the shape. Do the first side, then turn it over, hammer those loops. And before I get too carried away going up the sides, I want to curve those wires back round into the shape we started with. And then I can hammer that top curve. And we're ready to start weaving. To weave this, I'd suggest using about 1 metre of the 0.4 or 26 gauge wire. I've actually got 1.5 metres here, which is way more than you need. I'll probably only use about 70 centimetres of it. And then leaving a tail of about 15 centimetres or 6 inches. Pop the wire through the centre and wrap that inner left wire 3 times. Then we're ready to add our first bead, but I'm just going to curve that wire slightly and then add the bead. And that wire wants to come up through the middle of the heart there. And back over that frame wire. Just check that you're happy with how the bead's positioned and sitting. And then hold that bead in place and wrap that inner frame wire twice. And then we want to come through between the 2 frame wires at the side. And I'm just going to make sure they're sitting where I want them. And wrap around the outer frame wire. And we're going to wrap that 3 times. Then we'll go back across and wrap the inner frame wire twice. Take the weaving wire between the 2 frame wires and over to wrap the outer frame wire again 3 times. Then we'll head back to wrap the inner wire twice again. And I'll bring that wire up through the centre and we're ready to add the next bead. We'll make sure it's sitting how we want it. Hold it in place and wrap twice to secure it. We're then going to weave up to the next bead exactly the same as we did before. So we've got those 2 wraps on the inside wire. We'll wrap 3 times on the outside wire. Back over twice on the inner wire and 3 times on the outer wire. then twice again on the inner wire, and we're ready to add the next bead. So there's basically 2 sets of 3 wraps on the outer wire and 3 sets of 2 wraps on the inner wire between those beads. We'll add that 3rd bead, hold it in place and wrap twice on the inner wire, and then wrap 3 times on the outer wire. And these are going to be the last 3 wraps I'm putting on the outer wire on this side. You could carry that weave on a little bit further if you wanted to, but I quite like leaving it just as partly woven. But I want to put 5 beads on this in total, so we've got 2 more yet to put on. So I'll put the 2 wraps on the inner wire that I would have done previously. But then I'll skip moving over to the outer wire and just put those 2 next wraps on the inner wire. And then add our 4th bead. We're now getting around that curve, so it's a bit fiddlier, but we're still doing exactly the same thing, getting into the position we like, and then holding it in that position whilst we coil the wire. Because we're going around that tight curve, we're likely to need more wraps between the beads. I've got the 6 here, and I think if I put the bead on at this point, they'd be touching. So I'm going to add an extra couple of wraps. And then add that final bead. And then I want to wrap down to where I can move the weaving wire across to the other side of the heart. And I've got fairly easy access to where the ends of the wires are. So that makes it a little easier to take the weaving wire through between the 2 frame wires. Now I'm nearly at that centre point. So I'm going to take the weaving wire across and around that back inner frame wire. And then I'm just going to continue wrapping up to where I've got access to the outer frame wire. So I'll just coil that inner curve. And I've actually got 9 wraps on there. But at this point I can move across to that outer wire. So I'll take the weaving wire between the 2 frame wires and wrap that outer frame wire 3 times. And then between the 2 frame wires and wrap the inner wire twice. And taking that wire around where the loops are just makes it a little bit easier to weave. So I'm going to wrap 3 times around the outer wire. And then 2 times on the inner wire. So it's kind of mirroring the weave we did before. And I'm going to continue until I've got 5 sets of the 3 wraps on the outer wire. Then I'll take the weaving wire through and wrap 3 times on that inner wire just to finish off. Then we can trim off the excess wire and just make sure it's sitting flush to the frame so it won't catch. And now we just need to deal with the other end of the weaving wire. It's just coming through on the inside point of that heart. So we'll take that weaving wire and wrap the inside wire on the other side of the heart twice. This is easier to start from the back and then flip the heart round. Then we'll wrap both wires twice. And bring the weaving wire up between those two frame wires and wrap just the inner wire twice. Then we'll wrap both wires twice again. Wrap the inner wire twice, and then both wires twice. So we've got 3 sets of the wraps on both wires. Then we're going to finish off by just wrapping that inner wire twice. You can trim off the excess and just make sure that weaving wire is flush. And we can adjust those wire loops to where we want them to be. Now that's all the weaving done, and we can leave the pendant as bare copper like this, or as I've done, patina it with some liver of sulphur. And then we can add the chain with a jump ring on that uppermost frame wire. And that's our pendant finished. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and head over to my website for more hints, tips and projects. Thanks for watching and I'll see you soon.